Hello, everyone. This will be a series of podcasts to explain the concept of globalization in the contemporary world. By contemporary world, we mean the world here and now, the present time, and the world we live in. As young people, you are both fortunate and unfortunate to have witnessed the best and worst of the contemporary world. I would say you are fortunate because your generation has the power of the technology within your hands. Generation with technology within your reach. You use your mobile phone to communicate to the world, and information are just available to you at your fingertips. And so much can be done with this information and technology to change the world. You can help other people's lives, making them better, including your very own. I would say unfortunate in a way because your lifetime has seen the worst part of the world, like war, pandemic, economic turmoil, environmental degradation resulting to unspeakable calamities, which we all can relate during the typhoon Odette, which hit hard most part of Cebu Island. But despite all this, we are still thankful of our ability to adapt to change and disasters, which we call resiliency. And it is an important lesson that you want to impart even to your future children. A story definitely you want to tell them. So for this explainer, I would like to tackle more in the concept of the contemporary world as an ever-changing mix of social and political changes. We have seen conflicts in religion, politics, and even social conflicts. But we also see challenges of the 21st century, including emerging technologies, healthcare, overpopulation, climate change, poverty, education, diseases, and migration. This subject will introduce you to the many phases of a phenomenon called globalization. And upon reading some of your comments, it has come to my conclusion that many of you see cultural globalization and political globalization as deterrents or negative towards our national identity. In the examining of ability to see the important lesson in our life today, uh, we are going to look into um, the controversial topics, globalization that is. And we can see many definitions and arguments in the internet written by different authors. And these arguments can be negative or can be positive at times. But as scholars of the world, we would like to examine the concept in a positive way. So we will use what we call interdisciplinary approach, where we discuss issues in terms of social sciences. So we will consider them as subjects instead of looking it more negatively. So we'll just consider it as a subject. That is what we meant by interdisciplinary approach. Okay, so we will discuss issues in terms of social sciences. We will examine issues in the field of economic, social, political, technological, and other aspects to increase our awareness of the interconnectedness of people and places around the globe. That is why personally I would like to use Manfred Steger's all-encompassing definition of the term. And he said that globalization is the expansion and intensification of human relations and consciousness across world time and world space. The course will provide you an overview of the various debates and issues in global governance, development, and sustainability. So if you have time and data or cell phone data, I would urge you to look into news that shape the world today, issues that may be political or social or economic in nature that will have a direct or indirect impact to your day-to-day activities. So for today, we talk about the origin of the concept of globalization. Scholars identified five perspectives how globalization began. How did globalization start? First, they would say that it is hardwired, meaning it has become part of the human nature to make our lives better. And by hardwired, we mean that it is a human tendency to reach out to other people or other nations in the case of globalization. One can trace the beginning of globalization from our ancestors in Africa who walked out from the said continent in the late Ice Age, and this long journey finally led them to all known continents today after 50,000 years. One author, Nayan Chanda, said that people tend to have urges or inclination towards commerce, religion, politics, and warfare. Further to this, Chanda said that men are naturally drawn to four aspects of globalization. First, trade. Second, mission work. Third, adventures. And fourth, conquest. Those forementioned aspects are innate, or shall we say, in the nature of the human being since the start. We're always drawn to trade or commerce, help our neighbors, start an adventure, and of course, we want to expand our properties and wealth through conquest. The second perspective or theory of the origin of globalization is cycles. Globalization is considered as a long-term cyclical process. Funny to think that many of us think that the world has gone smaller because of globalization, right? But goods, trades, uh, foreign direct investment or FDI, movement of people have become very common at one point. And suddenly what happened? COVID-19 happened. COVID-19 struck all of us, and all the countries have closed their borders at one point, at one time. And I would say that the pandemic has restricted our movements, crippled tourism, and limited the business transactions that have become fluid at one time. A theory said that this point of globalization will disappear and it will appear at one time, thus forming cycles. Third, epoch, EPOCH. Ritzer and Thurborn, who are both authors, have read the six epochs or period of globalization, also called waves, and each has its own origin. The only difference between epoch and cycle, they pointed, is that epochs are not returning. According to Ritzer and Thurborn, globalization began the following sequence. First, globalization of religion from 4th to 7th centuries. This is where religion such as Christianity has spread in all parts of the world. We also experienced this when the Spaniards came to our land and introduced the Catholic faith. Second, European colonial conquests began in late 15th century. Western colonialism, a political economic phenomenon whereby various European nations explored, conquered, settled, even exploited large areas of the world. The age of modern colonialism began in about 1500s, following the European discoveries of a sea route around Africa's southern coast and America in 1492. The third is the intra-European wars, that is late 18th to 19th centuries. Occurring within the boundaries of Europe or between the countries of Europe, intra-European political movements have put countries for a struggle for power, for dominance, and for territory. Number 4 will be the heyday of European imperialism. So that is in the age of the new imperialism, began in 1870s, European states established wide empires mainly in Africa, but also in Asia and the Middle East. Through the use of direct military force, economic spheres of influence, and European countries dominated the continents of Africa and Asia. Another one is the post-World War II period. In Western usage, the phrase post-war era or post-war period usually refers to the time since the end of the World War II. More broadly, a post-war period is the interval immediately following the end of a war. This time, nations have come together rebuilding lives after the disaster that is brought about by war. So, Second World War or World War II conflict involved every part of the world during the years 1939 to 1945. The principal actors were the Axis and the Allies. The Axis powers are Germany, Italy, Japan. And the Allies are France, Great Britain, the United States, the Soviet Union, they were still friends at that time, and to a lesser extent, China. The war was in many respects a continuation after an uneasy 20-year break of the disputes left unsettled by World War I. The 50 million deaths incurred in World War II make it the bloodiest conflict as well as the largest war in history. Number 6 is the post-Cold War period. The Cold War was an ongoing political rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union and the respective allies that developed after World War II. This was to be the long-lasting and continuing confrontation between the Soviet Union and the United States, lasting from 1945 to 1989. It was called the Cold War because neither the Soviet Union nor the United States officially declared war on each other. Another perspective of globalization is events. Specific events are also considered part of the fourth view in explaining the origin of globalization. So, if this is the case, then several points can be treated as a start of globalization. Some authors would would posit that or would suggest that Roman conquest centuries before Christ were its origin. In some authors, the armies of Genghis Khan into the Eastern Europe was the beginning of globalization. Also, some authors would claim that globalization started when Christopher Columbus discovered America in 1942, or Ferdinand Magellan completing the circumnavigation of the globe in 1522. Or even the technological advances can also be considered as the turning point for globalization. What are these? Example, the first transatlantic telephone cable in 1956, or the first television broadcast in 1961, or the founding of the modern internet in 1988, or even the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center in 2001. These are seen to be the possible reasons why we have the type of globalization concept we have right now. Lastly, these recent changes comprise the fifth view of globalization. So these recent changes that we're seeing, scholars have pointed out that the following origin of globalization as follows. Number one, the emergence of the United States as the global power. Number two, the emergence of multinational corporations or MNCs. Number three, the demise or death of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War. Well, through its dominant military and economic power after World War II, the United States was able to outrun Germany and Japan in terms of industry. So both Axis powers and allies fell behind economically as compared to the new global power that is United States. Because of this, US began to progress in different aspects like diplomacy, media, film, and many more. Also, before MNC or multinational corporation came into being, their roots are from countries of origin during the 18th to 19th centuries. The United States, Germany, and Great Britain had their own homeland great corporation which the world knows today. However, they did not remain there as far as their products and markets are concerned. For example, Ford and General Motors originated in the United States, but in the 20th century, they exported more automobiles and opened factories into other countries. MNC or multinational corporations have operated also in Asia. Examples are Starbucks, KFC, and McDonald's. Then somehow they have become TNCs, transnational corporations. You'll know the difference when in terms of control. So those five theories, as we discussed, are seen to be the reason why the world has become very small as we see it today. First, hardwired, meaning it is our nature. Second, cycles, just like any trend, it will appear, then reappear, or appear, disappear, and then will reappear. Third is epoch, meaning globalization is like an event really extending a period of time, usually characterized by a distinctive development. And fourth, we have events or series of breakthroughs and discoveries that led to the globalization. And lastly, the recent changes in our economic or political landscape that drive us to adapt to the changes. So before we end today's podcast, let us look into some reactions from your previous posts. Okay, let me check. Ortiz Judel from 2A said, I strongly agree with economic globalization. In my understanding, globalization allows businesses to increase jobs and opportunities in developing countries, where the cost of labor is often cheaper. Right. The result, growth in these countries may be slow or stagnant, and unequal economic growth. While globalization tends to increase economic growth for many different countries, the growth isn't equal. Richer countries often richer countries often benefit more than developing countries. Okay, good point, Judil. This is a phenomenon called globalism as opposed to globalization. When you talk about globalism, this is an uneven spread. So not even, uneven spread of globalization to the rest of the world, especially in developing countries. By the way we call them developing, we are referring to Philippines, Laos, and those countries that are still developing, not underdeveloped, not third world countries anymore. Okay, so better way of saying it is developing countries. So, for example, in the distribution of COVID vaccines, we notice that some countries are now in the third and fourth booster shots, like Israel and some other countries like US. But some countries have remained so poor that vaccines are not accessible and have not reached at least a portion of their population. So that is what you call globalism. While the rest of the world is experiencing wealth, the others are experiencing severe hunger. From Tubi, Mel Robert Maranga, I don't agree with cultural globalization because it seems that the existence of other countries' culture, there must be tendencies that we slowly forget our Filipino pride or less acknowledge our own culture. Yet we should not forget it because our culture identify us who we really are. Correct, correct, correct. Very good. Well, male culture is defined by our constitution as collective expression shared by people. Collective expression shared by people. There are a lot of definitions, but I would like to take culture from the Philippine Constitution's context. Cultural globalization, however, is a phenomenon by which the experience of everyday life is influenced by the diffusion, the diffuse commodities and ideas, and reflects our cultural expressions around the world. So it is an inevitable, it is irreversible, meaning to say you cannot change it anymore. Look at the change in our clothing, food, entertainment. They have become part of our daily lives. They have become products and the influences of the other countries in our life. However, this is my point. Borrowing and translating culture into our own can be the best way to attack this one. Like for example, rap artists like black people are known to have good spitting techniques for rap, but we have also our own version. We have also our own rappers in our country. So we put what we call Philippinism is adding your own flavor to what is already existing. So it is becoming common in music and the arts. So, for example, even in architectural, did you know that even during the Spanish era, churches, the building of churches have influences in European designs, but the architectural structure and designs are also definitely Filipino. There are Filipino architects during that time. Excuse me. From Tusi, Aya Nicole de la Victoria, I agree with globalization. Companies can find lower cost ways to create their goods as a result of globalization. It also enhances global competition, which lowers prices and gives consumers a wider range of options. People in both emerging and developed countries rather, benefit from lower prices and they may live more comfortably on less money. True, true, true. While importation really creates good competition, but certainly countries that don't have strong backbone in terms of production capability, de la Victoria can really suffer as well. For example, we are facing rice and pork crisis right now. No, we are having crisis in terms of rice. What we are doing now is we are importing rice from Vietnam, from Thailand, when we should have what? Supported our own local farmers to be able to have a good and strong and stable political or food supply in the first place. So during the pandemic, I think we were having problems with sourcing out even pork. And right now they're thinking of importing even fish, which is quite a slap on our face, according to one of the political aspirants, no? Because we're not supposed to be importing fish because we're surrounded by water and we're supposed to be sustainable in a way. So this happened because of this importation and globalization, where imported goods are cheaper and even competing your own local products. From January Tamayo of 2D, I disagree with cultural globalization because it may result to the rejection of another culture. It is admirable that we respect the culture of other countries, but enforcing and adopting them into our own would result in the extinction of our own culture. Okay. So January, it may not be like that. Actually, it's not going to be extinction of your own culture. Number one, our Philippine Constitution has always provided us the provision that our national identity must remain intact as much as possible. So we are going to guard that. We are going to make sure that our culture can still be introduced in on so many ways. For example, televisions in our law, television should if I'm not mistaken, should show around 30 minutes to 1 hour every day, showcasing our own culture to make sure that Filipinos are able to relate and able to appreciate our own culture. So there should be cultural shows that should be shown on television. And of course, it is being taught in the school. uh, we have our national culture committees and department that will preserve and conserve our heritage sites. Remember the newly signed law by President Duterte regarding preserving of the heritage sites in places. So that's part of preserving our culture. General view of 2E, I agree with economic globalization. It refers to the widespread international movements of goods, capital, services, technology, and information. Connection of money. Ah, connection of money or flow of money by the process called trading. Okay? 2G, Gisrael Gupio, by the aid of social media and different platforms that are present inside the internet world, the social aspects of globalization arose. And for me, this is where toxic, toxicity, right? Okay. Happens that made me feel against its flow. Indeed, social context of globalization widens the overall view of a person in terms of information interactions, but the negativity that it caused is visible in today's generation. Nevertheless, through self-control and discipline, the toxicity will surely be eradicated. True, Mr. Gopio, no? The social media have really entrenched in our culture and even in our lives. We are the highest users of social media at an average, and we make a lot of transactions over it. Social media are really good platforms for us for connections, for making business. And if we stick also to the positive side, you have already seen tremendous growth in terms of business, commerce, in terms of social connections. What what may be very very costly before to connect people have become less than a peso now with the presence of social media. So being said, so if we are able to use the social media to our advantage and maximize its potential rather than spreading fake news, spreading bad news, um, making it our weapon against other people, or using it in a negative way, we can see that social media really have great advantage and benefits over the less negative, or even the young people are able to maximize its power and potential as a source of information or a way to connect people. So I guess we will just educate ourselves, even the young people. Number one is to limit the use, possibly for young people. And number two, we fight information with information. So if there are disinformation, meaning information um, that are intended to deceive people, then we fight it with the good information. Okay. 2H, Patrick Oswaldo Roy. Globalization deepens the relationship between every country, especially in businesses and political relations. But there's a specific aspect of globalization that I don't agree with some of the ideas of political globalization, where some powerful countries capitalize on developing countries. Laos has that to China. Okay, Laos unable. Yes, Patrick. I already answered this one on your Facebook. Thank you very much for raising this debt crisis with Laos against China. So, okay, I will just read some of the um, information or post next meeting or our next podcast or next lesson. Keep them coming. I suggest for this activity you write questions and then we'll be able to answer it over podcast, and also read more so that you will be able to understand better what the world is happening, on how the world operates nowadays. Now, for your activity, I would like to ask you to look for the definition, a definition. There are many definitions over the internet on globalization. Aside from Manfred Stigers, it can be negative or positive definition. but find a definition of globalization that strikes you most, that gives you an impact, or it gives you a certain it strikes you most, and then you post it for our attendance or activity for today. Okay, so please take care of yourselves, and protect always yourself from infections, and eat healthy, and please make sure that you get 8 hours of sleep. And if you have problems, you can always contact your advisors, your mentors, and we'll be here to be with you all the way, in order for you to survive these unprecedented times of pandemic. All right. So see you next time. Bye bye.